Welcome to my channel, The Good Book Tales. Today, I want to take you to a place far away from the noise of our world. A place lit only by flickering oil lamps, where shadows dance along stone walls and silence fills the air. It's night in the house of God. Most are asleep, yet someone is about to be awakened in a way that will change his life forever. This is the story of how Samuel hears God's voice for the very first time. Imagine a boy, probably no older than 12, lying on a mat in the temple. He's been here for years, serving the old priest, Eli. His days are filled with sweeping floors, lighting lamps, and helping with sacred duties. He's grown used to the rhythm, morning prayers, chores, and the quiet hum of worship. But tonight will not be like any other night. The air feels different. Outside, the stars hang low, glittering like secrets waiting to be told. Inside, the lamp of God still burns, its golden light spilling across Samuel's face. He closes his eyes, ready for another night of rest, unaware that the next voice he hears will shake the foundations of his world. Suddenly, Samuel hears his name. Clear, distinct. Samuel! His eyes snap open. He sits up, heart pounding, and looks around the dim room. Eli must have called him. Who else could it be? The boy hurries to Eli's bedside and whispers, "Here I am. You called me." But Eli, blinking himself awake, shakes his head. "I did not call you. Go back and lie down." Samuel returns to his mat, confused. Maybe he imagined it, but just as his head touches the pillow, there it is again. Samuel. It's the same voice, gentle yet full of weight. Again he runs to Eli. Again Eli denies calling him. Twice now. Something isn't right. Outside, the wind brushes softly against the temple walls. Inside, Samuel's heartbeat echoes in his ears. He lies back down, now fully awake, his mind replaying the sound. Could it be someone else? Or something else? For a third time, the voice calls his name. Samuel. This time he hesitates before rising, his breath shallow, his hands trembling. When he reaches Eli again, the old priest doesn't dismiss him. Instead, a new look comes into Eli's eyes, one of realization. He understands something Samuel doesn't yet know. The Lord himself may be calling this boy. But Eli's words stop short. Samuel waits, the air between them heavy with unspoken truth. The oil lamp flickers, casting long shadows on the temple floor. Somewhere in the stillness, a presence is near, watching, waiting, ready to speak again. And just as Samuel leans in, heart open to hear, the night holds its breath. The stillness in the temple seemed almost alive, like the walls themselves were listening. Samuel slowly walked back to his mat, each step feeling heavier than the last. His thoughts were tangled. Why would someone call his name in the middle of the night? And why would Eli suddenly look so serious, almost cautious? The boy lay down again, but sleep was far away. Every creak of the wooden beams, every rustle of the night air made him wonder if the voice would return. Samuel's life had always been quiet and steady. From the time his mother Hannah had brought him to serve in the house of God, his days were filled with learning, serving, and observing. He had grown up in the presence of sacred things, golden lampstands, stone altars, the scent of incense drifting through the air. Eli, the priest, had been like a guide and caretaker, though age had slowed him and dimmed his eyes. The boy knew Eli well. And Eli was not the type to play tricks. If he said he hadn't called, then something else was at work here. The world outside the temple was very different from the peace Samuel knew inside. There were rumors of unrest in the land. Some said the people had turned away from God, chasing after other ways, other voices. Eli himself had carried the weight of personal sorrow. His sons, who should have followed in his steps, had made choices that dishonored their calling. Maybe that's why Eli seemed so certain now, after the third call. Maybe he had been waiting for a sign, something to break through the silence that had lingered for so long. Samuel turned on his side, eyes fixed on the soft glow of the lamp. His heart was restless. The voice had been unlike anything he'd heard before. Not loud, yet it reached deep inside him. It was both strange and familiar, like remembering something you didn't know you had forgotten. He couldn't explain it, but he knew one thing. If it called again, he would be ready. In the shadows, Eli stirred, sitting quietly in his own thoughts. He had served God for decades, but even he knew that such moments were rare. If the Lord truly wanted to speak to Samuel, then the boy's life was about to change forever. And yet, Eli also knew that hearing God's voice was never a small thing. It could call a person into courage, into danger, into the unknown. The night stretched on, thick with mystery. Outside, the wind died down, and the stars seemed frozen in place. Somewhere in that silence, something holy was waiting to be heard again. Samuel closed his eyes, every sense alert, wondering if the next sound he heard would be that same voice, calling him once more. The voice came again. "Samuel!" It was the same gentle strength, the same weight in the air, but now it felt even closer, as if it was not coming from across the room, but from within the very space around him. His heart raced, but this time he didn't rush to Eli in confusion. He remembered the old priest's sudden change of expression, the way his eyes had sharpened when the voice called the third time. Eli's words still echoed in his mind. "If you hear it again, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" Samuel sat up slowly, the cool stone beneath his hands grounding him in the moment. The shadows seemed to shift, as if something unseen was moving just beyond sight. In that quiet, he realized this was more than a call, it was an invitation. But to what? He had no answers. In another part of the temple, Eli sat awake, listening for something he couldn't hear, but desperately hoped for. His thoughts were heavy with the past, years of silence from God, mistakes that couldn't be undone, the corruption of his sons. If this voice was truly God speaking to Samuel, then perhaps a new chapter for Israel was beginning, one that did not include him at the center. The temple itself seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the faint sound of night animals stirred in the distance. Inside, the warm glow of the lamp made the air shimmer. Samuel felt the weight of the moment pressing in on him. Somewhere deep inside, he sensed that answering this voice would set things in motion that could never be reversed. And yet, even as the thought formed, the voice spoke again, steady and patient. "Samuel?" This time, it felt like the night itself leaned in to listen to his reply. Samuel's breath caught in his chest. The voice was closer than ever, so near it felt as though the air itself carried it straight to his heart. His fingers curled against the mat, and for a moment he thought the walls around him might tremble. Every sound in the temple seemed sharper now. The faint hiss of the oil lamp, the rustle of fabric as he shifted, the slow rhythmic beating of his own pulse in his ears. He could sense it. This was not an ordinary moment. Somewhere in the unseen, something powerful and holy had stepped near, breaking through the quiet that had stretched for years. The night no longer felt empty. It was alive, charged with meaning. His mind swirled with questions. Why him? Why now? What could the Lord want with a boy who simply served, swept floors, and lit lamps? In the dim light, Eli's form was still. The old priest knew this was no dream. Every muscle in his body seemed to listen, as though straining to hear what Samuel would hear next. He did not speak, but his silence said everything. This was a moment that could not be interrupted. The shadows deepened, and for a heartbeat Samuel felt as if time itself had paused. He could almost hear his own fear mingling with an unexplainable pull to answer. The weight of the voice was not heavy with anger, but with purpose, like a summons to something far greater than he could imagine. Outside, the wind rose in a soft sigh, brushing against the temple walls. The air around Samuel seemed to lean in, every part of the world holding still for what was about to happen. His lips parted, trembling, ready to speak, when the voice came again, steady, patient, impossible to ignore. Samuel. The sound wrapped around him again, but this time something was different. The voice carried a weight that pressed against his chest, not crushing, but anchoring him in place. It was as though the very air in the temple shifted, like unseen doors had opened. Before he could answer, a sudden chill swept through the room, and the flicker of the oil lamp dimmed for a moment before steadying again. Samuel's eyes darted toward the shadows, half expecting to see someone there, but there was no one. He swallowed hard. "Speak, for your servant is listening." The words trembled out of him, yet they seemed to echo far beyond the stone walls, as if they had been caught and carried by something invisible. For a heartbeat, there was silence. And then the stillness seemed to split, as though something larger than the temple itself leaned close to speak, not just to his ears, but to the deepest part of him. But before the message could fully take shape, a strange sound broke the moment. It came from beyond the temple walls, distant, muffled, but urgent. It wasn't the wind this time. It was low, rhythmic, and growing closer. Samuel froze, torn between staying and listening or running to see what it was. Eli stirred from his place, his tired eyes narrowing. "That sound, it doesn't belong to the night," he muttered under his breath. The noise swelled, like the pounding of hooves or the echo of hurried footsteps. Samuel's skin prickled. This was not part of the calm, sacred stillness he had known his whole life. Something outside was moving fast, bringing with it a feeling of trouble. The voice did not fade. It remained, patient but insistent, as if it had chosen this exact moment for a reason. Samuel's heart raced with the pull of two worlds, one calling him into divine purpose, the other warning of something coming from outside that could change everything. Eli rose slowly, leaning on his staff, the lines of his face deep with worry. "Samuel," he said quietly, "whatever happens next, you must be ready." The distant sound was now at the gates. The air grew thick, caught between the voice of God and the footsteps of approaching unrest. And Samuel knew he stood at the edge of something far bigger than he had ever imagined. The pounding at the gates shook the temple walls. Samuel's heart thundered in rhythm, torn between the voice that still lingered in the air and the urgency outside. Eli moved toward the entrance, but the boy could feel the invisible weight of the moment holding him in place. Then the voice came once more, not loud, but so clear it drowned out every other sound. "Samuel, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle." The words carved themselves deep into him, sharp with truth, yet heavy with sorrow. Images flashed in his mind, darkness falling over the land, judgment against corruption, a changing of leaders. He saw Eli, not as the wise old priest beside him, but as a figure standing at the edge of something final. His chest tightened as understanding sank in. The message was not just for him. It was about Eli and his household. Outside, the pounding became voices, urgent, breathless messengers bringing news from the battlefield. Samuel barely heard them over the thundering in his own mind. Eli turned to him, eyes searching, as if he already knew what the Lord had said. "Tell me," he whispered. Samuel hesitated, the weight of truth pressing on him, but the voice within urged him to speak. Slowly, he delivered the message of God's judgment on Eli's sons, of the end of his line as priests, of the change that was coming. Eli listened without flinching, his shoulders sagging, but his voice steady. "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." The temple fell silent again, but outside, the messengers' cries grew clearer. Israel's army had fallen, and the Ark of God had been captured. Eli's face went pale. He took a step back, then another, before collapsing where he stood. Samuel's breath caught, the weight of loss and the reality of the prophecy crashing over him. Yet in that moment of grief, the voice returned one last time, not with warning, but with promise. "Samuel, you will speak for me." And just as the words settled in his soul, a sudden flash of light swept through the temple, as if the lamp had flared brighter than ever before. Then dimmed again, leaving Samuel standing alone in the quiet, holding a calling that would change the course of a nation. The temple was quiet again, but it was no longer the same quiet Samuel had known before. The air still carried the echo of the Lord's voice, and deep inside, Samuel knew nothing in his life, or in Israel, would be the same. Outside, the night had begun to give way to the pale light of morning. The stars faded, and the first streaks of dawn touched the horizon, as if the sky itself was opening a new chapter. The messengers had gone, carrying the heavy news to the rest of the land. Eli's passing had left a hollow space in the temple, yet Samuel could feel a new responsibility pressing into that emptiness. He was no longer just a boy who lit the lamps and swept the floors. The Lord had spoken to him, trusted him with words that carried weight for a nation. Samuel walked slowly through the temple, his hand brushing against the familiar stone walls. Everything looked the same, yet it all felt different. He thought of his mother, Hannah, who had prayed for him before he was even born, and dedicated him to serve here. He thought of Eli, who had taught him the rhythms of service, and who had, even in his final moments, trusted the Lord's will. The ark of God was gone, the people were shaken, and the future seemed uncertain. But in that uncertainty, Samuel felt something he had never felt so strongly before. A steady, unshakable clarity. The voice of God was not distant or reserved for rare moments. It was living, active, and ready to guide those willing to listen. As the sun rose higher, Samuel stood at the doorway of the temple and looked out toward the land beyond. The wind carried the scent of the fields, and the voices of people beginning their day rose in the distance. Somewhere out there, change was already moving, and Samuel knew he would be part of it. He turned back to the sacred space, the lamp still burning inside, and whispered softly, "Speak, Lord, I'm still listening." And with that, he stepped forward, ready to walk into the days ahead. Not as a boy, but as a prophet chosen to carry God's voice to a waiting world.